Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we review books of every genre looking for the best of fun escapist books. And today we're doing a science fiction book called Big Trouble, Little Earth by two authors. One is Chaney and the other is Anspach. And this is a small publisher, maybe self-published, although they've got like 100 books in there, so I'll just say small independent publisher. And it does feel that way, although I will get to that in a little bit. So the plot. This is a science fiction, it's not a military science fiction, it is an action-adventure comedy science fiction. I have to repost the video and interject here because I forgot to actually say the plot of the story. I had posted it and then looked at it and went, oh shoot, I'm missing the plot. Okay, the plot is kind of weird. So our main character arrives, he's a smuggler, he's got a job to do of some variety, he doesn't know what it is. He arrives in Little Earth, which is basically a slum area on an alien planet where the humans are kept. Mostly they can't get off planet. Anyway, he connects with his contact, and his contact doesn't really give him any details. It's just like, follow me. And then they spend a whole bunch of time on this plot of basically him following his friend around, doing a job that he doesn't know anything about, trying to collect something that he doesn't know what it's for. And eventually it kind of resolves to be that they are trying to find pieces of Earth that somehow were shoved in an alternate dimension. Like Earth was divided up into like 10 pieces and put in alternate dimensions or something like that. It's very much, you don't know how or why or when or anything about this. That's just the MacGuffin in this that they're trying to track down. It's really just an excuse for these people to go all over the place and do all sorts of things. Stumble through booby traps and have dog fights and just anything you can think of to have action. It's an excuse for the action. The plot really isn't a big deal in this book. So the things I like about this would be the action, the fun spectacle of action that this book has. The characters, they have, space battles and chases and gun battles and samurai and ninja and superhero-esque powers, and it just goes on and on and on as far as stuff is happening all the time. There is a lot of high adrenaline stuff happening, a variety of stuff. So the author does a good job with all the stuff that's happening all the time. And it starts right at chapter 1, basically, and just continues till the very end. Big monsters and goblin-esque, demon-esque, interdimensional beings, and just all sorts of things that are constantly happening. So there is good with that. I will say it is not a realistic type of thing. You have, so the over-the-top action, it defies the laws of physics in many ways. Some of them purposefully in it, like the characters will comment and say, this defies the laws of physics, and this has more dimensions than actually exist in reality, and this one is folding into itself, and whatever. But there's also some little things of, somebody jumps over somebody else and then kicks somebody else in the head, and you're like, okay, nobody in real life can actually do that. You just can't leap over a person casually and then kicks the next person in the head. I mean, even if the first person is like bent in half, that would be really challenging to do. So you get the sense of that over-the-top dramatic stuff that happens in movies, not in real life. Okay, world building. The world building is unique in this. You have the idea of a huge space filled with different aliens, humanity being a small portion of that, and kind of an oppressed people. Very few people can get out of the slums, that kind of situation. And So the world building is interesting. There is not an extensive delving into that, but there is significantly everything that's given is in relation to the plot, and so you find out the history of humanity and the lies told to humanity and how they're kind of being oppressed, and a little bit of what happened to get them in this situation. That's kind of the backstory of what's going on and why the action is happening. It's a little bit bizarre. Like, by the end of the book, I really couldn't give you a really good summary of what was happening, what had happened to get humanity into the position that they're in now. Even though that's a big part of the story, it doesn't feel necessarily coherent all the time. But it does have pretty decent world building in that respect. And several of the alien species, you get fairly good handle on what they're like. That's kind of interesting. Okay, snarky banter. This whole book is one of two things. It is either snarking or it's action. That is pretty much all that happens there. You've got witty repertoire of remarks from the main characters. You have three main characters as they're going through things, and they just talk to each other all the time, in all circumstances, even when it's totally not appropriate. So I will read a little bit on one page, on page 79. How did we get here? And we were surrounded by about 20 very surprised-looking guards in black silk uniforms. And one absolutely massive enforcer looks considerably less surprised than everyone else in the room, more vengeful and angry than anything else. It's the same guy who is crashing through walls, trying to stop us from getting this far. Notice the crashing through walls. That's not very realistic either. You know, I say, I'm starting to think the universe has a weird sense of humor. Dalton, we just teleported, Coda says, then murmurs to himself. This proves my theory correct. Teleportation? Could have picked a better landing spot, like my ship. I didn't pick anything. It was the enforcer cracks his knuckles. The sound echoes through the chamber and sounds like small explosions. Welcome to the House of Wu, he says. You can die now. About that. I raised my hand, showing my empty pistol in a gesture I hoped to convey, saying we didn't want any trouble. Any chance we could schedule dying for another day? My calendar's pretty full. Instead of answering, he makes the same elaborate hand movements from before. Chi energy starts gathering around his fists. Your calendar, he says, just cleared up. Okay, as you can kind of see, it's kind of cheesy dialogue, but this happens throughout the entire book. Basically, anytime anybody opens their mouth, it's either a little bit of exposition or it's banter. That's pretty much all it is. Okay, so I do like the humor in this book. I will say that there were a couple of times I genuinely laughed at it. My husband also read this book, and he laughed several times throughout the course of the book, mostly on how over the top it was. It was just so much, it defied expectations on exactly what was happening next that it made him laugh. So, switching to things I dislike about the book. Okay, the author of this book, the authors, are fans of banter and action. They want to move the plot forward in both of those respects. They do not want to slow down and give you descriptions. Not descriptions of people or aliens, not descriptions of the environment, nothing to do with your senses. Like, this is not a book with a lot of anything except for this happened and they said this. Those are the two things that the authors do a lot of, and it really actually kind of crimps the reading a little bit, because they'll be like doing something and you're like, wait, where are they? What exactly does this look like? How are they going in this direction? I was picturing it completely differently. Because as you're reading something like this, they're like, and they got into the maintenance quarters and it was really cramped and small. Okay, fine. And then they start going in a completely different direction, like they have multiple branching paths, and you're like, oh, I didn't picture it that way, okay. And then suddenly a creature comes bursting out of something, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that something was there, and what exactly is happening? So there were a couple of things like that where they give you really, really sparse description of whatever their environment is. They have a space battle where they're coming really close to a star, and they're like doing this amazing maneuver to try and get other people out of the way, and they're like, and we're shaking apart, and then suddenly they're not next to the star. It seems like everything is fine, and you're just like, when did that happen? So because it's so sparse on the description, you can sometimes get lost in, or at least it skips ahead, and you're like, oh, that wasn't the way my mental map of what was going on was. So it's not an advantage to have had it this sparse on your description of what's going on. So some other things. Lack of realism. Okay, so this can be a funny thing. It can also be kind of annoying because you are wanting to suspend your disbelief, but you suspend it so far, and then they jump over that into another, okay, you've got to suspend your disbelief a little bit farther. And it is so far out there that sometimes it can just be hard to suspend your disbelief enough. It has some things like, I kind of pictured it a lot like a Chinese action film where the characters are having battles on rooftops and they like float themselves from rooftop to rooftop as they do their kung fu action. There were things like that in that book where it defies reality in ways that you can be like, I'm not quite able to handle that. So a little bit of that realism would have been a lot nicer. There's also some plot holes in this. And I guess maybe it's a case of maybe there's a lack of description, maybe there's a lack of realism, but sometimes in it you're like, wait. So like there's a big moment in this where the book has to take the characters to something to liberate some things. And they're like, we've got a closing in time frame, and there's artifacts that are interacting, and they're doing this thing. And it seems like, okay, what exactly is their goal here? Okay, what exactly is it? It's not always super clear. They're there for a teleporter device, okay. But they're also needed to do something with these artifacts that are resonating in some way. Like, okay. But when they get there, the teleporter teleports them somewhere else. It's I guess a purposeful because it gets them where they need to be, but it's random in that they didn't intend to do that. And then they left all the artifacts behind and nobody cares. And I'm just like, I'm confused. Were they there for the artifacts? Were they going to do anything with the artifacts? Were they going to try and stop the artifacts? I don't know what was going on with the artifacts. And so you have some things like that in the book where you're like, wait, why are you here and what are you doing? What is the purpose behind this it kind of lacks sometimes. Okay, the snark, the banter, it actually got to be too much and a little bit repetitive. So the main character is constantly doing, every word out of his mouth is snarky. And because of that, you end up feeling like he's never sincere, ever. You're in the middle of a firefight and all you're doing is bantering with your friend over there. Yeah, whatever. And after a while, you just kind of feel like there's no stakes in this because he's just constantly bantering. He's going to be fine. There's no emotional depth. It's the emotional depth of a teaspoon. The characters do not have any real emotions. I mean, he could be being tortured and you're just like, yeah, whatever, he's going to be fine. He will push through it. It'll be good. Because you don't really have any emotional connection with these characters. There's too much snark, and sometimes it's repetitive in the sense of they say the same things. So our main character is constantly saying things like, you know what I hate, and he'll give something. And it's meant to be snarky. And then he'll say a little bit later, you know what I hate most, and it's kind of snarky. A slightly different thing that he hates the most. You know what the worst part is? And he'll say that several times. I ended up feeling like it needed an editor to shrink down the amount of snark to make it actually more impactful. I felt like it was too much in a way that actually did not benefit the story. The humor didn't always land, and because it didn't always land, but because it's so constant, you're constantly bombarded with it, I didn't connect with it all the time. It was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, let's move on. Okay, there are a couple of typos. I only found 2, but so a little bit of editing work needed there. The main character, I would say he is Han Solo. It was kind of funny. The characters felt like cookie cutter stereotypes. So our main character is Han Solo. It's like they just cut him out of a different story, Star Wars obviously, and pasted him in here with another name. So he loves his ship. He has that same kind of attitude. He's a smuggler who just wants to get paid. They even have a couple of quotes in here that's almost taken from Star Wars, like, don't tell me the odds. Yeah, he says that to a ship who is trying to give him the odds. A robot, right? An AI. And, I'm only in it for the money, even though he's clearly not. Things like that you're just like, this is Han Solo. It's kind of funny. They've got 2 other characters with him. These are not Star Wars characters, at least not that I could tell. One of them is the girl, and she kind of reminds me of Lois Lane, a reporter who wants to get the story at the expense of her common sense. And then he's also got another friend with him who, I guess, Jackie Chan, I don't know. This is very interesting. The character development and the relationships is so shallow here. I actually couldn't tell you much of anything about the Jackie Chan type of character, the best friend, because they don't have any conversations that really make me feel that I know them as characters. They are cookie cutter, 2-dimensional characters, all of them. So there is that. They also have what I would consider really convenient skills. That kind of thing. So our reporter character, her name is Jennifer. She joins the expedition here fairly early on in a moment of tension, one of the battles, of course. And you discover as you go along that she keeps getting more and more skills as you go along. So they're on the ship and like, what do we do? And she takes apart a coffee maker and makes it into a resonance scanner and then can interpret the resonance, and she can, manipulate something to translate foreign languages, and you're just like, oh my goodness, really? This pseudoscience thing that she could just magically have skills to do, and you're like, okay, sure. And then later on, at the very end of the book, she breaks out in kung fu too, and you're like, oh, of course, she's got to have that too. It was improbably convenient. It was, yeah. Okay, so my evaluation of this, my overall opinion is that this book is fun. It is not good. It is, and my husband actually said the same thing. He was like, give it a rating of cheese. It's a rating of cheese. If you want something silly with, it has a good lighthearted tone that's just a space romp, kind of a space opera with lots of banter and adventure, then sure, go for it. But it really wasn't good. It really was not well written. I really felt like it needed an editor to really slash down some of the dialogue, really flush out some of the things that I consider like plot holes or confusing moments, and expand on descriptions so you really could get a good feel on both the characters and the locations, and it just needed more. It needs more work. This is a great rough draft. It just needs more work. So, I'm going to give this a rating of okay. It's just not good enough to highly recommend. Okay, on to part 2. I'm going to try another romance. This one's just a romance, not a romance fantasy or anything. It's called Love Lake Farms by B.K. Borison. And this is supposed to be, I think, modern day. It is got the tropes of fake dating and holiday stuff. Romantic comedy. So we'll try that next. I don't know that I have high expectations for a romance because some of them are just so they've got the tropes so big that they're not even very good. But this one had good ratings, so we'll try it. Thank you for watching.